All right guys, so today I want to do a shop tour video, which I have not done in a number of years. And obviously a lot of things have changed since then. I bought this new shop. I have renovated a lot of it. And I figured it'd be kind of fun to look at the shop now, compare it to before it was renovated, and just kind of show you guys how I've set everything up, how I organize things, and just give you a tour. So right now we are standing basically right at the entrance of the shop area itself. Directly behind the camera is that 10 by 10 garage door. There's also a entry door here. And then immediately upon entering the garage door, I have my lumber rack set up. And I think personally, it's a great idea to set up a lumber rack immediately inside from whatever, kind of load in area you have. It's really nice to be able to pull it in off of my truck, put it on the rack, and keep all that cool or warm air inside the shop, not going outside. Also in this front area, I have my Craig ACS, which is a track saw table, and I think I'm gonna be using that to roughly break down sheets of plywood as I'm bringing them into the shop. I think it'll be super nice to have this big open space to break down sheets of plywood. I built a little extension kind of platform that goes along with the ACS, and I think breaking down my material on this track saw table will make it a lot easier and safer to bring to my table saw, which is gonna be the next thing in the workflow. So as you can see, the next two big tools I have set up after that kind of track saw, lumber rack area are my miter saw on my miter saw station. I've had this thing for years. I built it at my first shop in our garage. This is based on the J. Bates miter saw station. I did modify it a little bit to suit my needs, but works great. It has a ton of storage. It is pretty big and pretty deep. I don't know that I'd make it that deep if I had to build it again, but overall it works great. And then the other big tool obviously is my table saw here. And so when I think about workflow in a shop environment, I think about what tools I'm going to use to break down those larger pieces of wood, things like sheets of plywood, rough lumber, that kind of thing, into smaller pieces of wood. And obviously the two main things I use to cut material are the miter saw and table saw. I've had this same table saw for years now. I can't even remember how long it's been, but it is the 5 horsepower SawStop ICS. It's a total beast. It does everything I really need it to do, and it works great. I also built that little storage cabinet under the extension wing at my previous shop, and that has been really handy for organizing all of those little accessories that go along with the table saw, push sticks, blades, jigs, all that kind of stuff. And it's really nice to have all that stuff tucked away under that extension wing, which is otherwise pretty much just dead space. So let's continue on along this wall, and next in line is going to be my plywood rack. So I built this simple plywood rack at my last shop, and it's been working out really well. It'll hold, I think, 10 or 15 full sheets of plywood, but then it's got these 2 shelves that hold a bunch of those plywood scraps, which I can never seem to bring myself to throw away, especially these days. The prices of plywood in general are so high. So I've definitely taken my plywood hoarding to a whole nother level. But this thing was super simple. I basically just built it out of scraps, and I would highly encourage building something like this if you work with a lot of plywood, because all of those offcuts can really pile up. And you can see that I've already kind of outgrown this plywood rack, but I think that'll remedy itself once I start building some more shop furniture here in this new shop space. Also, I should mention here behind me, I have this little Dust-Rite dust collector from Rockler. This is the mobile version of this dust collector, so it's on wheels. Really handy. I've been using this for my miter saw because I didn't duct that in. I really don't like having the miter saw connected to my main dust collector because I use that IVAC automatic dust collection system, and I don't really want this whole system turning on every time I make one cut on the miter saw. So I personally prefer to have the miter saw kind of separate. And I also forgot to mention it when we were at the miter saw, but I do have another shop vac directly below the miter saw, so I can have the shop vac hooked up to the actual dust port on the miter saw. And then I have the larger dust collector connected to a port that basically sucks any of that airborne dust that the shop vac doesn't get, which ends up being quite a bit of it. It definitely doesn't collect all of the dust, but it definitely helps to keep a lot of that airborne dust down, which is what I mainly worry about. So speaking of dust, let's continue on down this wall and talk about my big dust collector. So this is my main dust collector. This is a Clearview EF5. It is an absolute beast. It really does suck quite a bit. I have it hooked up to a 55-gallon drum, and even with that size of drum, it is amazing how quickly I can fill it up in probably 15 or 20 minutes of planing. If you have a larger planer or jointer, I definitely wouldn't go any smaller than a 55-gallon drum. As you'll know if you saw the dust collection video I did here in this new shop, I built this closet space, this kind of soundproof closet for this dust collector in an attempt to reduce the noise created by this dust collector because it is unbelievably loud. And I definitely considered venting the dust outside, but the problem with that is it also vents your cool or warm air outside as well. Because really the thing that makes a lot of dust on a dust collector is all of that air being pushed through these filters. And I know I got a lot of comments in that dust collection video asking whether this mostly airtight closet would restrict the airflow, and I bought an anemometer,
You broke me.
Anemometer. And I bought an anemometer to check the airflow and see if it was being restricted. Haven't done that test yet, but I'll keep you guys updated in the future. I'm not personally worried about it because this closet is far from airtight, but I do know that it has significantly reduced the sound levels here in the shop. You can actually have a conversation with the dust collector running, which is awesome. And I definitely think it was worth building it into this whole closet setup. So let's keep moving along this wall to my pallet rack, which is next in line. So this pallet rack has been another new addition here at the new shop. It's got 2 levels. I might add a 3rd level because really I think there's gonna be a lot of wasted space here. But basically the whole point of this pallet rack is to store sheets of plywood. And as you can see, I don't currently have it set up that way. I have a bunch of junk loaded up on here. But the idea is I can have various types of plywood that I can then quickly pull off of these pallet racks and bring them over to my CNC, which is in this room behind us. And as you might remember, I also built a soundproof room for my CNC, very similar to how I set up my dust collector. I still haven't built the doors for that room yet because my CNC isn't really set up yet. But once again, my goal there is to reduce the noise levels from the CNC, which is incredibly loud when it's running, especially if I'm using my vacuum table because the vacuum pump is insanely loud. So my CNC is made by Avid. It is a 4x8 CNC, meaning I can load up a full 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of plywood or MDF on it. And I absolutely love it. It's a total beast. I used it a ton when I was doing the kitchen cabinets for the tiny house build. And I have a whole video on building this CNC as well as the vacuum hold down table for it. So you can go check those out, but I still need to get it set up here. And also, unfortunately, it got some rust on it when I was spraying some of the mold spray when I had the big mold outbreak here at the shop. Evidently that mold spray, whatever was in it, caused all of the metal that it came into contact with on the CNC to rust. I'm gonna try to do some rust removal there, and I'm really hoping that it's salvageable because otherwise I'm gonna have to get a bunch of replacement parts. We'll see, I'll keep you updated. I'll probably do a video on that. So from here, let's go back up to the front of the shop and go along the other wall. And let's take a quick detour into the living and office space in the shop since I have been doing a lot of work in there as well. So this is the door that leads in right by the garage door. And through here is my kind of living and kitchen and office space. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to buy this building is because I could work here with multiple people, got a full kitchen. It's really nice to have all this space. So over here in the living space, which you guys have seen me renovating over the last couple of videos, I put in this vinyl plank flooring, I put in all new kitchen cabinets, and I've also set up this second workstation, and I've got my Windows laptop here because all of my CNC programs are Windows based. This is a standing desk. This is made by FlexiSpot, who is the sponsor of this week's video. So this E7 Pro base is an upgraded version of FlexiSpot's E7, and the Pro version is more stable, has a higher weight rating and a higher lift range, better cable management, and basically everything about it is better. It moves up and down really smoothly, so nothing on your desk is gonna rattle or get knocked over. And even at its highest level, which is over 50 inches, it's wobble free. The E7 Pro is powered by dual motor engines and can lift up to 440 pounds, which is kind of nuts. The base feels super durable. It's made out of carbon steel and comes with a 15-year warranty plus a 30-day return policy. And best of all, the E7 Pro is cheaper than other brands because FlexiSpot has their own factory, so they can sell direct with no middleman. FlexiSpot's desks are also super customizable, and they come in a bunch of different sizes and colors to fit pretty much any decor. And the E7 Pro's built-in cable management tray keeps the desk looking nice and tidy. You can also accessorize the desk with things like drawers, casters, chairs, and other FlexiSpot accessories. The E7 Pro has a massive height range range all the way from 25 inches up to over 50 inches, and you can easily program in different height settings for multiple people with the keypad panel, which also features a USB port for charging devices. So if you're interested in checking out a FlexiSpot desk for yourself, you can get $180 off on the E7 Pro for a limited time, plus you'll get an additional $50 off with my code YTBCW. Also, when you purchase a desk, you can get a C7 chair at half price, and this offer includes the E5 desk, which is also on sale if that fits your budget a little better. Thanks again to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this week's video, and let's continue on with the tour. All right, so as you can see, my table saw is over here on my left, and then I have my jointer set up here on my right, and then my planer and drum sander are set up behind me. And this area is what I call my triangle of milling, because basically I can take a board, I can break it down to rough length or rough width using the miter saw or table saw, and then I can do all of my milling work all in this area. So I can hit the jointer first to flatten one face and one edge, and then I can take it over to the planer to get it milled down to thickness, and then I can bring it back over to the table saw to get it ripped to width and cut down to length, either with a crosscut sled or over at the miter saw. And I've had my milling tools set up in this way in, I guess, pretty much every one of my shops, and I just really like this workflow. It's kind of similar to kitchen layout where you want your sink, your stove, and your refrigerator in a nice, easy to access triangle. I find these tools also work great when they're arranged in that configuration. As far as the specific machines, I have a 12-inch helical head jointer, which is a total beast, and I don't really see any reason to ever upgrade this thing, honestly. My planer is a 20-inch helical head planer, which is also a total beast. And then my drum sander is one thing that I am considering upgrading. I don't really like my drum sander very much. I know Cam from Blacktail Studios always complains about drum sanders, and I kind of feel the same way. I end up with burning a lot of times, and really if I had my kind of wish come true, I would have a wide belt sander. And so that's definitely something I want in the future, but considering those are about $20,000, I'm probably gonna have to keep waiting on that until I win the lottery, or maybe just can save up for a couple of years. So anyway, from here, let's continue on along this right wall, my right at least, to my bandsaw. All right, so here is my bandsaw. I don't really know what to say about it. It's a 15-inch bandsaw. I am considering getting a second smaller bandsaw so I can have a thinner blade on that for cutting curves and leave this one set up with a resaw blade. Because it's such a powerful bandsaw, I think a resaw blade is really perfect for this thing, and I personally hate changing bandsaw blades. I am not the greatest bandsaw user. I always have a hard time getting these set up and tuned to perform the way I think they should perform, so it's something I would like to work on. I have it on a mobile base so I can easily pull it out if I'm ripping down really long pieces. And also I do have it furthest away from the dust collector because I tend to find that the bandsaw produces the least volume of dust compared to a lot of the other machines like table saw, planer, jointer, that kind of thing. So if there's gonna be any loss of suction between the dust collector and a machine, I tend to want to have that happen with the bandsaw. Now let's turn around and talk about what I'm calling the woodworking platform, which is directly behind you, and talk about some of the stuff I have set up over there. So I guess we can just work our way around this woodworking platform in the same way, starting here on my right wall with my French cleat wall, which is really kind of the backdrop of most of my videos. I absolutely love this thing. I built this years ago. It's a great storage system. It looks really cool, and I love having things hanging on the wall so they're easily accessible. I can just grab them and go. To the left of me, I have my workbench. This is a Joburg's workbench. This thing's a beast. I really don't know what more I would want in a workbench. It's got 2 vices, it's got a bunch of dog holes, it's got a bunch of drawers for storage, and it's just really heavy, really solid. And one bonus feature that I found out after getting a pallet jack is that I can actually use the pallet jack on these bottom stretchers to move the workbench around, because I did have some of those Rockler workbench casters which worked fine, but this thing is probably like 500 pounds, and even with those casters it was a total pain to move around, so I definitely prefer using the pallet jack now that I have one. So I guess now let's continue on along this wall back to my drill press. So this is my drill press. I've had this thing for years now, ever since my first shop, and I don't really see myself upgrading from it. It is an awesome drill press. This is the Nova DVR Voyager, I think is what it's called. But the thing I love about it is that it is a direct drive drill press, so there's no belts, so I can change the speed with this little dial here. I can also use the menu system here to decide what speed I need to be drilling at. So I can select my type of bit. So let's say a Forstner bit in this case. Let's say it's a 2-inch Forstner bit. it into hardwood, and it's recommending a speed of 250 RPMs. So I can select that, confirm it, and now it is set to 250 RPMs, which is insanely slow. That is just one of the coolest features I have ever seen in any drill press, and that's the reason I love this thing so much. I built this little drill press table for it at my last shop. I also have another cabinet over here for more bit storage. That cabinet used to fit under this drill press table until I added this mobile base, which I added during the whole moving process, moving from my old shop to this shop. So now the cabinet just sits next to the drill press cabinet. I also do have a Craftsman rolling tool chest here with a bunch of my kind of more mechanics tools in there, sockets, open-ended wrenches, all that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to be organizing a lot of my various nuts and bolts and washers over here as well, since most of the time I'm using those in tandem with a socket or a wrench. So I guess from here, let's continue on along this wall to my assembly table. So this assembly table is definitely one of the older things in this shop that I have built. I built this thing at my first shop, and I love this thing. I think it has really served me super well over the years. I still love having all of this T-track on the top. It is filthy dirty. There's tons of finish and glue that's dripped down into the T-track, but it's still working fine. I love having all these drawers down below. I also really love having all the sustainer storage drawers on either side of the assembly table, because the sustainers hold all of the accessories that go with those tools, which is why I love using the sustainers. And then I can just plug up the tool to the dust hose and the power cord on the boom arm and get to work. And I know a lot of newer woodworkers or people who are just kind of getting into this might scoff at some of the prices of Festool stuff, but I think some of their tools really are worth it. And just being able to swap from tool to tool with the same power cord is just such a game changer. And if you use Festool products and you don't have the boom arm, I would highly recommend upgrading to that, because I think it just makes working over a table like this so much nicer. Your cord isn't getting hooked on the edge of whatever you're working on. It's just really, really awesome. So from here, let's continue on along this back wall to my oscillating belt sander and my router table. So this back corner is going to be a little bit of a work in progress. My router table isn't going anywhere. I absolutely love it. I built that at my previous shop. It's a total beast. I love having the power feeder there so I can feed material consistently if I'm routing an edge profile on a long board or something like that. That's really nice. But one thing I am considering changing is this flip top cart, because I don't think I have ever actually flipped it since I built it years and years ago. This was another thing I built in my first shop. And that's because the tool on the underside of this flip top platform is my hollow chisel mortiser, which I basically never use. So I think what I'd rather do back here is change this up for a fixed table, since I don't really need it to be mobile. And I can have my oscillating belt sander a little lower, because it's honestly too high where it is right now to really be that useful. And then I also want to create a stand for my Craig Foreman pocket hole machine, because I love using this thing, but every time I need to use it, I have to pick it up off the floor, and I don't have any in-feed or out-feed support for it, which I think would be really helpful. From here, let's turn around and look at one of the newest things I've added to the shop, this lift top table. So my next project here in the shop is going to be building a large kind of workbench top for this lift top table, and I am really, really excited to have this thing set up. It's going to be a big torsion box top with a bunch of drawers, a bunch of T-track on top. It's going to be kind of similar to what my buddy Mike Farrington did with his. The real advantage of this kind of table, if you haven't seen them, is that you can adjust the height. So let me show you. So it can go way up, and the top that I'm going to be building is going to be like 11 inches tall. So that's much higher than I'd really ever want to work. Or I didn't realize that was going to be so quiet, but if I was working on something really tall, that's where this really comes in handy, because then I can lower this way down. And let's say I need to sand the top of a cabinet or something like that. Usually when I have to do that kind of thing, I have to put it on the ground. With this setup, I can drop it all the way down. I think honestly, this is going to get a lot more use than my old assembly table once I have it all set up, but it's going to be nice to have multiple big work surfaces so I can stage parts and pieces as I'm working on projects and not run out of room to work in here. And so we've basically ended up back where we left off on the first half of the tour. My CNC room is directly behind me here. So now let's turn around and go over to this corner of the shop where my spray booth is and show you guys what I have set up over there. All right, so this room behind me is where I'm gonna have all my metalworking stuff set up and my spray booth set up, but it is basically just a storage area at this point. I have not done any real renovation work in there, but I'm really excited to have a room dedicated to finishing so that I can do things like big epoxy pours or just spraying finish on furniture and then continuing to work out here in the shop, which is something I've never been able to do before. If I've been in the process of doing finishing work or especially epoxy work, I basically had to do that work and then just leave the shop because I didn't want to generate any any more dust. I've also been working on cleaning out and organizing some of the built-in storage that was already here at the shop when I moved in. For instance, this big cabinet was already here. This shop was a cabinet shop at one point in its history, so I'm pretty sure they were the ones who built this cabinet. And now I have a lot of my cabinet hardware, screws, extra sandpaper. I also have another shelf back here that was already here already, and I've used this to store a lot of my more construction-oriented tools, things that I don't use every day. So it's nice to have those tools set up there with all of their accessories and blades and that kind of stuff, so I can quickly grab them and go. So I guess from here, let's turn to my right, and I can show you where I store a lot of my paint and epoxy supplies, where the shop sink is, which I know some of you guys were asking about when I pulled out that big sink in the kitchen area. So let's check that out. So since this is directly outside of what will be my spray booth, I decided to set up this back corner to store all of my finishes. This is a flammables cabinet I've gotten for all of my oil-based finishes and solvents and that kind of thing. Then I have another cabinet over here for all of my water-based finishes and epoxy. So that way all of this is in one contained area. And then it's also really close to my shop sink so that I can easily clean up after working with those kind of things. I'm also gonna keep all of my HVLP stuff over here. So I think it'll be really nice to have all that organized and in one spot rather than kind of scattered throughout my shop like I had it at my previous shop. I also have the electrical panel back here, which if you guys watched my video on the electrical work here, you'll know that I rewired pretty much everything in this shop space, and I still have a ton of extra wire left. I don't really have a great place for that, so it's just kind of piled up in this back corner. And I guess from here, let's move to the last area on this main floor that we haven't really covered yet, and that is the addition. So as you can see, this addition space is kind of a catch-all storage area for me. It's a bit of a wreck right now, but it is so nice to have this space because, as you guys might remember, as part of the shop renovation series, I set up this huge bank of metal shelving with all of these storage totes. So that's been awesome for keeping things organized. I know when I did the flooring project in the living area, I just came and grabbed the flooring tote, which had all of my flooring tools in it. And that was just really, really nice to be able to just grab that and go. I also do still have those two giant industrial compressors in here, but I got a lot of comments in a video where I mentioned those saying that I should have those things inspected because they're so old. And so I have just depressurized those, turned off the power to them, and I am gonna have them inspected before continuing on with doing anything with them. I would love to get those set up and set up a big air system in here. On the other half of this addition, I have a bunch more random stuff set up. I have this gym setup, which, as you can see by its current state, I have not been using lately, so I need to get back into that for sure. But I also have that huge bank of solar batteries back here, and that's definitely something I'm gonna be installing. There's just a lot of logistics around getting a solar system this size set up, but that's definitely gonna be coming in the future. And then I also still have some of that mineral wool insulation that I brought from the old shop. I'm gonna be using some of that when I build the doors for the CNC room, and I might use some of that upstairs when I finish out some of the attic space. And speaking of which, I'm not gonna do a full tour up there and talk up there because it is unbearably hot up there this time of year, completely uninsulated up in the attic space here. So as you can imagine, it gets insanely hot in the middle of summer, which it is right now. But I basically haven't done much of anything with that attic space yet. I have gotten some quotes on getting it insulated, which were kind of unbelievable. If I wanted to do closed cell in the roof in the attic, the cost for that would be about $30,000. So that ain't gonna be happening anytime soon. I really do want to build out a lot of living space in that upstairs space. So if you guys want to see that happen sooner, if you are interested in doing the classes I've talked about doing here, maybe join my Patreon or YouTube members so that we can start saving for that. But it's definitely going to be phase 2 of the shop renovation process because I've just spent a bunch of money on this phase 1 and it's time to get back to woodworking. If you guys have any questions about something I didn't cover, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll link to a lot of this stuff in the video description. I'll also link to my Amazon store where I have different categories for a lot of these tools set up. If it's your first time here, go ahead and get subscribed and ring the notification bell. And last, if you want to support me, I sell merch. I have plans available for a lot of the projects I showed in this video. And I also have both Patreon and YouTube members set up. So go check one of those out. All right, thanks for watching, y'all. And until next time, happy building. Anemometer.